Since this House really doesn't vote upon the general budget, I wish to make a few points which are of very deep concern to me and my party with regard to what has been proposed by the Honorable Finance Minister in the budget itself. I'm sure the Finance Minister is a very distinguished professional and a person, would certainly heed to some of our suggestions which deal with the concerns of our economy, as also with the plight of the common man. Let me just start on a lighter note, where in the very opening and second page of his budget speech, the Finance Minister considers his predecessor as a very lucky man. I think his predecessor indeed, also a very distinguished Finance Minister, had the support of the government in policy formulation and in giving a thrust to the economic development of this country. There were certainly many, very difficult decisions which the governments at that time had to take. And the Finance Minister had the support of the government as also of various groups supporting the government at that time. I think Mr. Chidambaram is also substantially lucky, if not entirely lucky. It's only a lucky Finance Minister who inherits an economy which is growing at 8.5%. It's only a very lucky Finance Minister who inherits an economy where there is stable inflation, where there is a record foreign exchange reserve, where exports are growing at 20 to 25%. And India is increasingly making its presence felt as far as the economy is concerned in the world context today. You are lucky, sir, because nobody has a choice in the matter of selecting his predecessor. But you always have a choice in selecting your present company. And that is where your luck fails you. Because when you choose your present company, I can certainly see the enthusiasm and the commitment with which you want to take certain steps. But then a large number of your present company members don't permit you to do so. Almost every radical step you want to take faces criticism from those who choose to support you. And I think it is this real problem that's going to be a serious problem for you in the course of the year and the years to come that you'll really have to address yourself to. I know from the core of your heart you want to unlock some of the resources in certain sectors by even disinvesting, but your company doesn't permit you to do so. Your colleague attempts to give India a modern infrastructure in terms of airports. Your company doesn't permit you to do so. In fact, you are at times compelled to make certain announcements which really eat into the resource which otherwise would have gone into more useful areas such as infrastructure creation. And that is why when you have to work towards these compromises, that you produce a document. And I must say that there are steps that you have taken towards rationalization of taxes, etc., which have certainly been steps in the positive direction. But there are also some concerns which arise out of the proposals that you have made. And I think this is something which disturbs me, it should disturb you also. When budgets are normally announced by the finance ministers, the public opinion, the media, the reactions in the next few hours are of a particular kind. And in the context of this budget, one of the most significant and disturbing facts I found was that to understand this budget, one didn't have to watch the television that evening or even read the next morning's newspapers. It is only 24 and 48 hours later that people started discovering that there is some devil in the detail itself. And that is the devil which creates a problem. Now my friend Subiram wants to know what is the devil. Now let me just tell you some of the problems which arose out of this budget itself. Fiscal deficit. I think this is an issue of concern to everybody. The revenue, the expenditure the entire health of the economy itself becomes evident, and that's one of the key indicators itself. Now, the budget document indicates that from a consistent fiscal deficit of 4.5, 4.4, 4.5 in the past 2 years, we'll be coming down to 4.3 this year, in the coming year itself. And when one went into some of the details itself, one of the reasons by which you managed to achieve this was not the accounting formulations which have been carried out in the last few years, but then there was a change which was brought about this year. Now, it may be a defense that this change has been brought about after the recommendations of the 12th Finance Commission itself, but the recommendations itself, Mr. Jairam Ramesh referred to the Blue Book, the first part of the expenditure. For instance, the central assistance to the states, both in terms of grants and loans. Now, you maintained the grants as in the previous years, but as far as the loans are concerned, I find that there is a significant absence as far as the loans are concerned. There is an asterisk. For instance, the grant last year was, in the revised estimates, was 27,738 crores. It becomes 30,454 crores. The loan of 24,588 last year is not there this year. And when you look at the details itself, you discover the asterisk says that an amount of 29,003 crores, 0.22 crores, is included towards loans which the state or the union territory shall be enabled to raise as market loans in terms of the recommendations of the 12th Finance Commission itself. Now, what is significant is not the switchover. The switchover in the mechanism, whether you take the loans from the central government or you take the loans from the market itself. That's a different formulation that you have brought about. But if these loans, as per the previous year's practice, were added to the expenditure side, the concern with regard to the fiscal deficit itself would be much more significant and higher. And it is this that is amongst various factors which is causing concern as far as the state of the economy today itself is concerned. Now, when my friend Subhiram said, which are the areas of concern? Now, when the first announcement was made that corporate taxes are down from 35% to 30%, that is, the corporate taxes for the first time have come down to the level of private tax, individual taxation itself. Now, there was a significant welcome of this. From the corporate world to the Wall Street, we can earn kudos by making an announcement of this kind. But then when we look at the actual impact of the entire budget on corporate taxation, what do we find? From 35%, the taxes come down to 30%. But immediately, in the same budget, the surcharge is increased from 2.5 to 10. And therefore, what is reduced is really not 35 to 30, but that 30 itself has become 33 because there is a 10% surcharge itself.
Okay.
The educational cess was there last year in the 9-month budget. It is there today. That takes it to 33.66. And then the finance minister announces that the depreciation goes down in certain categories from 25% to 15%. Now, in all the industries which have an intensive capital assets as a base, and it is here that the manufacturing industry would directly come in, the impact of the reduction of depreciation itself would be felt in the accounts of every corporate, and add to it the fringe benefit tax. I have read reports from one corporate to another. In fact, one of the newspapers gave a chart itself that the net effect of all these steps, 35 became 30, but you add 3 to 30, you add 0.66 as the educational says, you add the impact of the depreciation change, you add the impact of the fringe benefit tax, actually the taxation in a large number of corporates would be 38% to 40 or even 41%. But the budget then says, the first announcement itself, that the reduction from 35 to 30% has taken place. Even in the context of individual taxation, as I said in the very opening, I have no hesitation in reiterating that. Rationalization of individual taxation was long overdue. It's a positive thing that the finance minister has taken several steps in that direction. But having taken those steps, there are a large number of concerns which need to be addressed. And when I read his statement yesterday in the newspapers today, that since some of these are proposals, he would revisit some of them. I am sure he would take this in the right spirit as a suggestion and revisit the ones, because under the earlier scheme, from section 80L to 88 to the standard deduction under section 16, there are a large number of deductions which were available. Now he's bracketed all of them, abolished those deductions and reliefs which were entitled to, and made a 1 lakh standard base. Now there's a debate going on whether you get more or less, but I really will keep myself away from that debate. But one vulnerable section is the senior citizens. And in the context of senior citizens, today itself I read in the Hindustan Times a reasoned article working out the chart itself as to how the change proposals in the context of the senior citizen actually increase the tax liability itself. Now, if this is correct on basis of these calculations, and I tried to make a rough back of the envelope calculations myself, and I do feel that some of these have substance. This is one area where the budget prima facie looked attractive, but when you see the details, it doesn't really work out with the object with which it was intended. And I'm sure the finance minister, when he responds to our suggestions now or after the break, when the finance bill itself is taken up, he would certainly like to revisit this area which deals with the senior citizens, particularly those whose tax liability has now increased as a result of these budgetary proposals itself. Take, for instance, sir, the proposal with regard to the Bharat Nirman scheme. This scheme was referred to in the presidential address to the joint session of Parliament also. And when I thought that there was a large amount of grant being made for the benefit of the rural sector itself, I thought after the Rashtrapati's address that some very significant initiative in the direction of Bharat Nirman is coming. We were anxiously awaiting the announcement because the President himself in the Central Hall had announced that the Finance Minister would deal with it in detail in the budget speech itself. And when I looked at the Bharat Nirman proposal to bring in an additional area of 1 crore hectare under irrigation, it's a very good proposal. But this very good proposal needs a huge amount of money to be allocated to it. I haven't come across any money being allocated for it. To connect all villages having a population of 1,000 or 500 roads, 500 people with a road, a very good proposal, but then rather than grudge us, you must certainly say that Mr. Vajpayee's government had taken this particular step towards Bharat Nirman. Bharat Nirman is not started on the 23rd of May 2004. If this was Bharat Nirman, it had started long ago. In fact, allocations have been made, and a very large number of villages of this country, literally lakhs of them, the connectivity process had already started. Additional houses for poor. You can rename the Yojanas, but the Yojanas have already existed. Drinking water, electrification, that's a big challenge. And if the Finance Minister, through all the initiatives which were taken earlier, particularly after the Electricity Act, and now as far as the village sector is concerned, is able to provide that connectivity, because this has to be done really at the level of the states, and the states have to be persuaded to act in terms of these reforms, I think we'd give him all credit for this. And finally, telephony as far as villages is concerned, it's also a great challenge. It's only in the last 7-8 years that this country has, post 1995-96, seen really the telecommunications revolution in this country. Our teleservices are not only expanding at one of the fastest pace, almost 8.5 is today the teledensity of this country. In our first 50 years, it was less than 1%. So that really has proved how the changeover of the new policy of telecom has benefited the country. You have plurality of choice, you have better services, you have probably the cheapest telecom service in the world. and one of the fastest growing telecom services. But one of the great challenges is that even those who have been now authorized by licenses or otherwise to provide telephony have been inadequate in connecting our villages to it. And therefore, if this is all to be done, these are all existing schemes. So when I said, when you look at the budget, Bharat Nirman, the build-up after the presidential address was that there is some very innovative program with a very large amount of funds being allocated for this which is coming. I find most of it is really a combination of what are the earlier initiatives going on by the earlier governments, by the governments even before that, and that's an element of continuity which has been maintained. I find the same with regard to the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Now, as far as the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is concerned, you can allocate about 5,000 crores for it. But that's not an amount which is going to provide to almost 1/4 of India one job per every rural family. And for the rest, the Food for Work program now becomes a National Food for Work program. Now, there is already a Food for Work program which is on. To call it a National Work for Food program and then expect that this will bring about a radical change as far as that is concerned, I think these are all initiatives which have been going on, and if these initiatives really manage to produce the results, it's only then that a finance minister of Mr. Chidambaram's caliber and capacity would really have a lot to smile about. As far as infrastructure is concerned, infrastructure needs resources. Infrastructure needs a private-public partnership. The NDA government had taken many steps towards infrastructure creation. Telecommunications, the whole policy which the earlier government had brought about, some changes were brought about, we gave an impetus to it. The rural roads, the National Highway Program, these are all infrastructural programs. But there are many areas where infrastructure, power sector particularly, is the most challenging out of that. It needs resources, it needs a will to implement, and that's something which the states have to come into. Look at the condition of our ports today. Our exports are increasing by something like 24-25%. The imports are increasing by 30%. So really the growth as far as our foreign trade is concerned is 3 to 4 times more than our GDP growth. And therefore that sector has a potential to become one of the great engines as far as growth is concerned. And the center where this whole industry lies is really as far as our ports are concerned. Now, if you look at the last few months, the kind of clogging on our ports which is taking place is absolutely unimaginable and unbearable. Trade facilitation costs, costs of delays are actually adding to the cost of our products and making them non-competitive. It is these areas which we really have to look at. And for these, we need a public-private partnership. Wherever you've expanded, even with private partnership, you've seen the effect on efficiencies. The Nhava Sheva port is a living example. The Prime Minister just went and inaugurated the new proposal as far as Valad-Padam is concerned. If that project takes about, it will go down as one of the most historical programs as far as port expansions are concerned. Now, these are areas where we need to invest the resource. But while we have to invest the resource, where will the resource come from? If the Finance Minister bears with me, in his last budget speak 9-10 months ago, under the heading Infrastructure, the Finance Minister said, and I'm just going to reread those 3 sentences, an interinstitutional group in the power sector has succeeded in bringing 6 power projects to a financial closure. Another 10 projects are on the verge of achieving a financial closure. The concept can be expanded to some other infrastructure sectors, and I am glad to announce that the IDBI, IDFC, ICICI Bank, SBI, LIC, Bank of Baroda and Punjab National Bank have formed an interinstitutional group. They will pool their resources on the callable basis, and a sum of rupees 40,000 crores will be made available as and when necessary. The IIG will ensure speedy conclusion of loan agreements and implementation of infrastructure projects. Initially, airports, seaports, tourism will be one of the target sectors of the IIG. Now, it was a very well-considered statement that the Finance Minister made. Now, how much of it really has taken off? When I read the chapter on infrastructure in this budget, I now found that after telecommunications, national highway, rural electrification, Indira Awas Yojana, we go to a special purpose vehicle. Now, as far as special purpose vehicle is concerned, the budget doesn't make an allocation. For 2005-2006, I propose to fix the borrowing limit at rupees 10,000 crores. Now, the borrowing limits have been fixed. Now, I do hope that something did happen last year. It's a fact that we want to know from the Honorable Finance Minister. Now, a special purpose vehicle for executing a particular project, I can understand. Whether it's in the for the highways, or it's for the ports, or for the airports, or the seaports, or for some power project. But now the interinstitutional group with a 40,000 lending capacity last year, now a borrowing limit of 10,000 for the special purpose vehicle to be created. Now, if these proposals look very fine as they are stated, but really what is the eventual object which these are able to achieve? How much is the implementation of these which is really going to take place? And let me just tell the Finance Minister that there is a genuine concern in the country that some of the infrastructural projects need to be expedited far more than their present pace. There is a growing feeling, the national highway programs, for instance, what is the expedition in that which is required? Has it slowed down? Is it maintaining the same pace? Because there's a lot of cynicism that the kind of center stage that project occupied today does not appear as far as that project is concerned. Having said so, sir, I have certain specific suggestions for the Honorable Finance Minister to consider in this budget, and some of them are suggestions which he may even like to consider on a later date. The budget indicates that as far as duties are concerned, both in customs and excise, he separately dealt with them, and the duties have been brought down. I heard the views of one of my colleagues from the left parties yesterday, where he was somewhat apprehensive about the custom tariffs in the manufacturing sector being brought down. Now, bringing them down today has its own advantages. Our manufacturing sector has been somewhat slow to pick up over the last few decades, but now it seems to be indicating a situation where it can almost go ahead. It's crossing the 8% growth figure and has the capacity to get into a double figure. Manufacturing sector is where the jobs are. If inputs for the manufacturing sector, raw materials, capital goods, if their imports into the country on cheaper raw material increase, that's an indication itself that your manufacturing sector itself is growing. And if your manufacturing sector is growing, the advantages of it in terms of creation of employment, in terms of profitability, in creation of revenue, in terms of enrichment of government, infrastructure creation, then that's a positive circle which moves on. Now, it's a positive step. I'm not opposed to the step. I remember only a few years ago when the peak rates in the manufacturing sector of duties was 35%. And then gradually 5% every year, it came down to 20% last year. And finally, you brought it down by another 5% this year. My concern only in this, that should this reduction be announced every year in the budget itself, even when the previous government, my government, was announcing it in the budget, or we must now seriously consider reducing this as a part of our multilateral negotiations. And I say this with some sense of concern. The agricultural negotiations are separately taking place. NAMA, the non-agricultural sector, are separate negotiations which are taking place in the manufacturing sector. Now, the WTO is a forum where you don't get anything for free. You have to pay a price when you want something, and you have to give a price, or you have to charge a price when others want something from you. Particularly when there is a multilateral pressure on us to bring down our customs tariffs down, any unilateral announcement really does not bring us any credit as far as those negotiations is concerned, and therefore for future years is a point which the Finance Minister would like to consider. Secondly, sir, is an issue where I am one with my friend Subiram Reddy. Service taxes have increased, more and more sectors have been coming into the service tax fold. It's understandable for the reason that the entire burden can't fall on customs duty or direct taxes or excise duties, which is mostly on the manufacturing sector. Service sector today occupies 52% of our GDP, and therefore service sector must also come within the tax net itself. But there are some sensitive areas, just as we mentioned the senior citizens in the case of the direct taxes, where service tax really requires a reconsideration. And there are two specific areas in your budget where I think in the present budget which requires a reconsideration. One is in the context of apartments blocks in a building where there are 12 or more apartments. And the second is the cleaning and maintenance services. Housing is one area where we've had a tremendous growth in the last few years. And this is one area which is going to grow by leaps and bounds. When housing is going to grow, and housing is something which every man, even from the poorer section, desires, a lower middle class man desires, the effect of this proposal has been that in every cooperative housing society, in every builder developed apartments, the prices have overnight gone up by 10% as a result of this. I can see the disagreement with the finance minister, but I'd like him to consider, in the context of developers and others hiring contractors, some of it would be mod-vatable. But when developers and owners and developers and housing societies sell it to their members or to flat owners, in the hands of the apartment owner, from a developer, it will not be mod-vatable. If I buy an apartment, there is no other duty against which it can be offset against. The same is going to be the position. And this is a very vulnerable section because these are people living in apartments who belong to the middle classes, the lower middle classes. The cleaning and maintenance services. Every cooperative houses in Delhi, in Mumbai, all over the country, that's the new trend. Now go in for community services as far as these apartments are concerned. And a 10% on top of that, I think is an area of serious concern. I will only refer to it because he's made a statement yesterday that he's revisiting this whole concept of cash withdrawal tax. But it's an area which I think there is within the system a very large consensus developing, and he'll certainly, I'm sure, respect the wishes of that larger consensus. And when he makes his own announcements later, he'd like to withdraw that. The tax on fringe... He has not imposed his salary. He's only proposed. The budget is always a proposal till the finance bill is, is approved, passed. But since he has made an indication yesterday, I am only supporting the sentiment of those who have made this suggestion. Pardon? The fringe benefit tax, the fringe benefit tax, I think, is an area on which he did not make any indication of a concession yesterday. There is a view to which I subscribe that the fringe benefit tax is really not only going to increase the tax burden, but the fringe benefit tax will also bring back the Inspector Raj. The fringe benefit tax will also become a tax on expenditure. And therefore, the fringe benefit tax itself requires an element of reconsideration by the finance minister itself. On the two cesses that you charge, one for education and one for the National Highway Program, I think it will be a good precedent to start off that how this cess has been consumed separately in both the cases. A transparent, clear statement is made every year and placed before the country to the parliament, so that we know that since this is a cess, we are paying for something. This is not to go into the Consolidated Fund of India and be used for other purposes. This is to be used for these purposes, and therefore it's reduced. Another area, and I am conscious of the controversy around this area, sir, is the area of retrospective taxation which has begun. And I am not referring to the ordinance that you brought about earlier this year. That itself is retrospective taxation. Retrospective taxation in any developing economy.
You have to conclude.
Sir, just give me 3-4 minutes more. Retrospective taxation in any developing economy, particularly when we attract investment, it destabilizes the stable taxation regime. One of the great talking points that we have is that India has a very stable tax regime. We don't have an extraordinary taxation regime where people can be charged for what they did 10 years ago. Accounts have been settled, balances have been, costs have been passed on to the consumer. And therefore, there are a lot of difficulties which arise. There is already a debate going on, which is not a part of the finance bill, about this retrospective taxation in the context of the ordinance that the finance minister brought about, because it upsets the tax planning of any investor itself. And it's a bad indication or a bad signal that we give to potential investors, both domestic as well as international. But I found that even in the present finance bill, there are at least 3 proposals which amount to, in my respectful view, a retrospective taxation itself. If the finance minister makes a note of clause 82, clause 83 and clause 87, some of these are to overcome court judgments. These are changes. The first one is a change to the Central Excise Rules of 1944. It's a retrospective taxation. It says that it has been amended retrospectively and will be applicable for the period 1st August 96 to 30th June 2001. The second is a retrospective taxation in 83 to the Senvet credit rules. The third is a retrospective amendment to the Chapter 15 of the schedule itself. Now, these are areas which I think also require a reconsideration by the finance minister, because retrospective taxation in any growing economy itself destabilizes the planning of any investor, and therefore as a practice we should avoid this practice to the extent that it is possible. I have again a point to support my friend Subiram Reddy on the question of increase in the steel duty hike to 16%. Now, in most cases where the manufacturing sector, etc., uses it, I agree with what the finance minister said in his speech, that it is not VAT-able. But in the context of construction industry, where the eventual burden comes to the consumers itself, the steel that we buy for building our own houses, and housing again being an important sector, would not be VAT-able, and therefore a 16% higher rate for an item as basic as this, I think is an issue which the Honorable Finance Minister would have to consider. Sir, I have concerns about the non-mentioning, and I worried because you mentioned the irrigation issues for the long term. What is the government's thinking on the interlinking of rivers proposal? What is the progress being made with regard to the Kisan credit cards, which is one of the very successful programs that the government has been implementing? These are all areas I think the finance minister would concern. And lastly, sir, my last suggestion to the Honorable Finance Minister would be, the SEZs are going to be very important engines of growth. For the last few years, we've been debating to bring the SEZs under a central legislation. But if the SEZs have to come under a central legislation, the SEZs would require the kind of infrastructure, the kind of trade facilitation, and also the kind of tax structures which their competitors internationally have. Those who manufacture within the SEZ don't compete with domestic manufacturers, they compete with international manufacturers. And unless we can give them a regime in terms of infrastructure, in terms of trade facilitation, in terms of interest rates, in terms of their taxation measures, which is competitive to the international players in the field, our SEZs really will not produce the same kind of results which SEZs, let's say in China and other parts of the world, have produced. And I read in the newspapers today that my friend Mr. Kamal Nath has been advocating a few more concessions in the SEZ proposed legislation than what the finance minister would like to give him. I would like to throw my whatever support my voice has behind behind the commerce minister. This is one area where the SEZ proposals itself can be beneficial to the overall direction as far as the economy is concerned. Sir, my time has run out. There were a few more points, but I'll leave it for my other colleagues to mention them. I'm sure some of these concerns which we've expressed, some for this budget and some for the future, the finance minister will certainly bear them in mind. Thank you, sir.
If the House agrees, I would like Mr. Murli Devara to occupy the chair for some time and then for a few minutes. Mr. Ramchandra, please. No, not panel speaker are not here, panel chairman are not here. That is why we.
Mr. Nariman, Mr. Nariman.
Yes. Mr. Subramanian Reddy will.
When are you coming?
I'm in about half an hour. These are the.
Sir? Mr. K. Chandran Pillai.
Huh?
Chandran Pillai.
Mr. Chandran Pillai.
Actually, this is the main thing, numbering.
That's what.
K. Rahman sir has done his own numbering.
Okay.
So K. Chandran Pillai's name is second here.
6
Already
minutes. 6 minutes.
Comrade
Sir,
Chitta
only 6 minutes.
See, the other speaker from a party made a maiden speech, so that cushion is to be allotted for me, I think. That was maiden speech. Okay. See,
Not 6, 8 minutes maximum, 10 minutes.
While registering certain observations regarding this budget, first of all, the focus,
Next
let
is.
me say, a democratic and determined focus on the common man's issue is indeed a welcomable step. But at the same time,
Next should be this now, sir.
I want to observe in this way, the
Next.
budget proposals overall is moving through the economic reforms track itself. In a way, it is accelerating also. Left parties actually submitted a memorandum to the government to consider the commitments made in the common minimum program. I think some aspects of the left memorandum are already appeared in the budget. That much it is appreciable. Mainly the part one of this budget is with that objective only dealt with. I am taking that also. Hence, memorandum is that of left parties, a common minimum program is that of UPA, and left are not a signatory to that. You take that also. So regarding employment, education, health, sanitation, drinking water, nutrition, and marginal sections consideration on SC and ST are all coming under that part one, naturally reflecting the aspirations out of the last verdict. We can put it in the political conventional category, I think. But I am registering certain apprehensions and concerns which are appearing in the budget proposals. In the agricultural sector, there is a definite proposal for the credit allocations, credit facilities. But I think agri-business and investments in the rural sector is focused on that part, so the direct benefit to the poor sections are not at all ascertained. That is to be revisited. That is my one observation. Another question is, actually common minimum program is with a commitment of 2 to 3% GDP for health sector. This actually demanding 70,000 crore to 1,05,000 crore up to. But the allocation is only 10,000 crore plus. This deficiency is a major lacuna in the budget, I think. Health being such a vital area, the commitment and the real allocation is very, very contradictory. That much it is disappointing also. Likewise, in the National Food for Work program, and it is related to the employment generation newly coming up scheme also, scheme and act. The total allocation is only 11,000 crore. That again with added value of the grains which is supplementary. Nearly it is 50 lakh. But I think for a better imaginatory program for the employment question, we have to go through the national sample survey observations as well as the recent census report also. Our rural employment growth rate is too low than the population growth rate. That is the reality. In such a situation, we are offering now targeted 150 districts and 100 days work for each family member. Employment for all is the dream slogan which all are celebrating. But we are now confining ourselves to a limited sector only. And the allocation is only for 11,000 crore. That allocation is not matching the requirement of the real gravity of the problem which we are confronting. So, according to rough estimates, more than 25,000 crore rupees is the demanding per annum commitment for this 100 days employment question. That is not adequately addressed by the budget. That is to be looked into further, I think. And again, all the tax proposals are with a strong direction for the furtherance of the reforms, economic reforms. Only two initiatives, fresh initiatives are introduced in this budget. One is that the withdrawal tax and that the fringe benefit question. Most likely that may be drawn. Most likely that may be drawn according to the finance minister's reply yesterday. But I want to say, so many tax concessions are allowed this time in the budget. In the corporate taxation, after all relaxations, finance minister is expecting a 33% increase because of the concession. And an income tax increase 30% again because of concessions. Again in excise duty, finance minister's expectation is 21% increase. I strongly believe our past experiences are not that encouraging while tax concessions were allotted. Whenever tax concession is there, realization is poor. Here an opposite thinking is coming up from the finance minister. I doubt whether the aspiration put up by the finance minister is going to materialize or not. And then with a strong protest in the corporate tax reduction. 36% is, according to me, unwarrantedly reduced to 30%. Whatsoever be the argument, I can't find any logic in it. Another question.
Hurry up, please. Time. Number of speakers are there already. Your time is over. A lot.
Permit me to put 2-3
Quick,
points
quick.
further.
No. No, I'm just indicating. Quicken.
See, in the budget speech, certain imaginative ideas were there. FDI attraction by India is to go up to match with China. Not matching, but considering the advantage of China, we should also go up. That is one idea. But we have to see the manufacturing industry's real situation also. China's GDP contribution through manufacturing industry is 54% according to my understanding, 54%. Whereas our service sector is now contributing to 60%. This is a disappointing situation. In such a situation, manufacturing industry is getting a very bad treatment in this budget. That is my argument. Manufacturing sector, inclusive of small scale industries, I mean. Almost 77 items are well reserved by this budget. Otherwise also SSIs are in doldrums. Without properly addressing that area, now fresh attack is again launching by this government. And in the manufacturing sector, customs duty reduction again to 15% is going to affect them negatively. Capital goods are permitted with the reduced customs duty means indigenous industries are going to suffer. So that point, not only we are losing our resources to the exchequer, we are acting against the interest of the manufacturing sector of India, which is coming down year by year overall GDP contribution wise. And another point which I want to make is diversification proposal for agricultural products. I think this point is to be reviewed. At least the advices from Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, like Towerley personalities, advice are to be taken care. See, the agriculture sector actually demanding a protection. In the international regime, we are in a competitive world. With the total acceptance of that reality, I am saying India as an agricultural predominant country, protection to the agriculture is not at all adequate through this budget, and the livelihood of crores of people is also involved in it. Food security is also involved in it. While diversifying from the present agricultural products, what will happen to our food security is a major problem to be looked into. Another question is the 50 paise per liter cess rise for diesel and petrol. I think that will naturally go to escalate the prices overall in the economy. That has to be withdrawn. And another area regarding the SLR CRL removals, I don't think it is going to benefit our economy at large. Even I think Reserve Bank is with some reservation. In that area, we are actually leading that activity to a speculative regime. It is not fair at all. That is to be reviewed. Another question. When that withdrawal tax is introducing, the purpose was mentioned that black money control.
10 minutes over, Chandran.
So just two important points to go back about immediately. The changes that are being proposed to CRR and SLR and the upper and lower limits are being proposed on the advice and recommendation of the Reserve Bank of India, and therefore the statement that you made, the Reserve Bank is opposed to it, is not a correct statement.
In that point, I stand corrected.
Yeah, that's all.
Let me take the other point. One moment. I can finish it immediately. One moment. See, another observation is, in this budget, certain major allocations are actually off-budget allocations. Such off-budget allocations actually because of the compulsions of political ones also, but I think this question actually leading to lesser allocations to vital sectors. That is an area where we have to make some corrections. And another question is regarding the FDI permission to mine sector as well as to pension funds. I am just citing the example of Myanmar. After permitting Burma Shell.
Please, 12 minutes over, 6 minutes over, 12 minutes.
Let me complete this point which I am taking now.
Please.
After. In mine sector, if we are giving an entry to an MNC or to FDI route, experience is that exhausting of our national resources by a very short span. Myanmar is the recent example. Now that country is 40th among least developed countries. So an admission to the mine sector by the MNCs is totally unwarranted. That is to be reviewed. And likewise in the pension fund also. Why we are permitting FDI or other agencies to work in pension funds? Ultimately, that will go to a negative impact at the cost of the pensioners of this country.
Mr. Chandran?
Yes, sir, I am concluding.
Please.
Okay.
Mr. Gandhi Azad.
धन्यवाद महोदय, उपसभापति महोदय।
आपको 8 मिनट है, 8 minutes.
हैं?
You have got 8 minutes.
1 मिनट। थैंक यू। मैं बजट के समर्थन में खड़ा हूं। बजट में साझा न्यूनतम कार्यक्रम एक पथ प्रदर्शक के रूप में माना गया है। मैं कुछ बिंदुओं पर प्रकाश डालना चाहता हूं। गरीबी, बेरोजगारी को मिटाना, आज देश की अहम समस्या गरीबी और बेरोजगारी है और हमारे देश में सबसे बड़ी संपदा हमारे देश का मानव संसाधन है। लेकिन आज मशीनीकरण के कारण गांव में जुताई, बुआई, सिंचाई और कटाई, कुटाई, पिसाई सारा मशीनीकरण के कारण गांव का मजदूर बेकार होता जा रहा है और उनके पास अपना खेत नहीं है, अपनी जमीन नहीं है कि जिसमें वह काम करके अपना जीविकोपार्जन कर सके। अतः मजबूर होकर के सामंती कुप्रभाव का शिकार होने के कारण वह गांव से पलायन करता है और पलायन करके शहर के औद्योगिक नगरों में शरण लेता है। लेकिन वहां भी मशीनीकरण के कारण, कंप्यूटरीकरण के कारण उन हाथों को काम नहीं मिलता है। अतः आज इस देश में सबसे बड़ी भयावह समस्या देश का इंसान बनता जा रहा है। आज इस देश में सारी चीजें महंगी होती जा रही हैं और मानव श्रम जो है सस्ता होता जा रहा है। यह एक विचारणीय विषय है। इसलिए आज जब तक हमारा वित्त मंत्री जी से निवेदन है कि जब तक ये गांव का पलायन नहीं रुकेगा, देश विकास की गति को नहीं प्राप्त कर सकेगा। इस पलायन को रोकने के लिए हमारा एक सुझाव है कि प्रदेश के सारे मुख्यमंत्रियों की बैठक बुलाई जाए और जो प्रदेश में, हर प्रदेशों में कृषि योग्य जमीन ऊसर पड़ती बंजर बचा हुआ है, उनको भूमिहीन कृषकों में, खास तौर से अनुसूचित जातियों में और अन्य भूमिहीनों में वितरित किया जा सके ताकि उनको रोजगार का अवसर अपनी भूमि पर मिल सके और यह बेरोजगारी की समस्या भी निदान हो सके और गरीबी का भी निदान हो सके। हालांकि माननीय मंत्री जी ने 100 दिन के काम के रोजगार की व्यवस्था का प्राविधान किया है, लेकिन मैं मंत्री जी से जानना चाहता हूं कि 100 दिन के काम की व्यवस्था तो है, लेकिन 265 दिन की व्यवस्था क्या है और 100 दिन के काम के बाद क्या 365 दिन का गरीब मजदूर काम चला सकता है? यह एक चिंतन का विषय है। इस पर गंभीरता से विचार करना चाहिए ताकि आज भूख के कारण जो देश के कोने कोने में मृत्यु हो रही है और आर्थिक विपन्नता के कारण जो आत्महत्याएं हो रही हैं, उस पर अंकुश लगाया जा सके। दूसरा, अंत्योदय अन्न योजना। माननीय मंत्री जी अपने बजट भाषण में 1.5 करोड़ परिवार से बढ़ा करके 2 करोड़ परिवार को बढ़ा दिया है। यह एक अच्छा कदम है, किंतु सरकार को यह ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि जो अंत्योदय योजना के अंतर्गत उनको जो सस्ते दर पर गेहूं और चावल उपलब्ध कराया जाएगा, मैं माननीय मंत्री जी से जानना चाहता हूं, क्या वो अंत्योदय परिवार के लोग, उनको क्रय करने की क्षमता भी है? अगर क्रय करने की क्षमता नहीं है तो उनको क्रय करने की क्षमता बढ़ाने के लिए क्या उपाय है? इसके साथ ही साथ मैं एक निवेदन और करना चाहता हूं कि गांव में जो बीपीएल कार्ड बनाए जाते हैं वह ग्राम प्रधान की देखरेख में बनाया जाता है। ग्राम प्रधान अक्सर सर्कस किस्म के लोग होते हैं जो अपनी गोल गोलैती के लोग वोट दिए रहते हैं, उनको बीपीएल कार्ड बनाया जाता है, चाहे वो संपन्न हो चाहे विपन्न हो। इस तरह से एक तरह जो विपन्न लोगों को लाभ मिलना चाहिए वह नहीं मिल पाता है। इसलिए मैं माननीय मंत्री जी से निवेदन करूंगा कि यह व्यवस्था जो है ग्राम प्रधान से हटा करके किसी निष्पक्ष इकाई द्वारा बीपीएल कार्ड बनाने का कार्य सौंपा जाना चाहिए। अनुसूचित जातियों और अनुसूचित जनजातियों के कल्याणार्थ अनुसूचित जातियों के लिए 1137 करोड़ से बढ़ाकर 1180 करोड़ किया गया है। 43 करोड़ की बढ़ोतरी बहुत ही कम किया गया है। इसी तरह से अनुसूचित जनजातियों के लिए 1087 करोड़ से बढ़ा करके 1146 करोड़ अर्थात 59 करोड़ की बढ़ोतरी नाकाफी है। इसे भी बढ़ाने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि 85% आबादी वाले अनुसूचित जात जनजाति के लिए यह जो धन है बहुत ही कम है। इसलिए मैं मंत्री महोदय से निवेदन करूंगा कि इस क्षेत्र में बढ़ाने की जरूरत है। इसी तरह से अल्पसंख्यकों के कल्याण के लिए और विशेष रूप से उनकी शिक्षा को ध्यान में रखते हुए अल्पसंख्यक विकास तथा वित्त निगम के लिए 50 करोड़ का प्राविधान किया गया है, और जिनकी संख्या इस देश में 15% के आसपास है, और यह धन जो है बहुत ही कम है। ये अल्पसंख्यक कल्याण के लिए भी इसको बढ़ाने की जरूरत। शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में शिक्षा को प्राथमिकता की श्रेणी में रखा गया है, और माननीय मंत्री जी ने अपने बजट में 2% उपकर लगा करके 400 करोड़ से लेकर के 500 करोड़ प्रतिवर्ष धन प्राप्ति की आशा सजोए हुए हैं, और संपूर्ण राशि को शिक्षा क्षेत्र में खर्च करने की योजना भी बनाए हुए हैं। और इसमें पका हुआ भोजन, विद्यार्थियों को दोपहर का भोजन देने की व्यवस्था है, लेकिन इस भोजन व्यवस्था के कारण गांव का प्रधान, स्कूल का अध्यापक अपना सारा समय उस भोजन व्यवस्था में अपव्यय करने के काम में करते हैं। जो शिक्षा में समय देना चाहिए वह भोजन पकाने में खर्च हो जाता है। इसलिए हमारा निवेदन है, इस व्यवस्था में परिवर्तन लाने की जरूरत है। जो आर्थिक सहयोग उस खाने के लिए बच्चों को दोपहर के भोजन के लिए दिया जा रहा है, वही धन चाहे अनाज के रूप में, चाहे खाद्यान्न के रूप में, चाहे रुपये के रूप में उनके अभिभावकों को दिया जाए, ताकि वो अभिभावक जो है घर से अपने बच्चे का खान पान की व्यवस्था करके स्कूल भेजने का काम करें, जिससे जो शिक्षा का समय खाना पकाने में खर्च हो रहा है वह न हो सके, और बच्चों को समुचित शिक्षा मिल सके, ताकि वो स्कूल से होनहार के रूप में निकल सके। इसी तरह से देश की आबादी का लगभग 25% अनुसूचित जात, अनुसूचित जनजाति की आबादी आज भी शोषण का शिकार है, और उनको शोषण से मुक्ति दिलाने के लिए सरकार योजनाएं तो बहुत बनाती हैं, लेकिन योजनाओं का क्रियान्वयन जो है सही रूप से नहीं हो पाता है, और सारी की सारी योजनाएं कागज पर धरी की धरी रह जाती हैं। इसलिए मैं सरकार से अपील करना चाहूँगा कि अनुसूचित जात, अनुसूचित जनजाति के लाभ के लिए जो योजनाएं बनाई जाए उनको उनके तक पहुंचाने के लिए भी कारगर उपाय भी किया जाए। इसी प्रकार अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय जो इस देश का 15% है, आज़ादी के बाद विकास के क्षेत्र में पिछड़ता चला जा रहा है, उनके हितों का भी ध्यान रखा जाए। मैं अपील करूंगा कि आज़ादी के बाद जिन वर्गों को अभी तक विकास की गति नहीं मिल पाई, योजनाएं बनाई गई तो क्रियान्वयन नहीं हो पाया, वह उपेक्षित वर्ग, अनुसूचित जात, अनुसूचित जनजात, अति पिछड़ी जातियों तथा अल्पसंख्यक वर्ग के हितों पर विशेष ध्यान का प्राविधान की प्रत्याशा में मैं बजट का समर्थन इन चंद शेर के साथ करना चाहता हूं। मंत्री जी, कि गरीबों का दुनिया में है कोई जीना, हो गर्मी या सर्दी, पसीना पसीना, और उनका पसीना पोंछने के लिए मैं आपसे निवेदन करना चाहता हूं कि गर हो जाए नजरे इनायत किसी की, कट जाए यूं ही मुसीबत सभी की। धन्यवाद।
Mr. B.J. Panda. You have got 8 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I beg the same indulgence of the chair that other speakers with 8 minutes have also got.
8 minutes you give. Manage as well as possible.
Sir, last year, on this same occasion, I mentioned a cricket analogy in which I said that the Honorable Finance Minister was the star batsman of the UPA government, but was in the unusual position of facing bouncers from his government supporters rather than from the opposition. Sir, I must say that he has negotiated those bouncers well and has very deftly conducted a balancing act in furnishing this budget this year, and I compliment him for that. Sir, there are some elements in this budget that even we in the opposition must applaud.